Talking about bargaining, let me start off by discussing what we will be talking about under bargaining and what we won't be talking about under bargaining. Bargaining and negotiation are often used as synonyms, whereas they are not. Okay? When we discuss bargaining, we're talking about a subcategory of bargaining, and it's a very particular subcategory of bargaining in which we are dealing with a known value, a known thing, and that thing is usually something that you can quantify. Okay? So there's a value that you can quantify, and the negotiation is focusing on it. And to keep things simple, we're going to talk about bargaining when you have one quantifiable chunk of value. Okay? So you're talking about a number. We are talking about situations such as, to keep it simple, the price of a car. When we are purchasing or selling a car, the buyer and the seller meet, and most of their discussion, not all of it of course, but most of their discussion is a discussion of what the number is that will be conveyed from one party to the other in return for the keys. Okay? So there's a typical bargaining scenario. And in this bargaining scenario, we know how the dance goes. Okay? One party opens high and the other party opens low, and perhaps they make offers, and these offers are called concessions, and they make counter offers, and they take steps towards each other, and they finally meet somewhere, or they do not, and they reach impasse. So that's a familiar dance, is it not? We bargain, or we tend to engage in this same dynamic anytime we're talking about quantifiable stuff. The most common is numbers. So we bargain over money. That's really the simplest set of examples, is anything that is money, whether it's the price of an item, the price of a service we give or we get, the salary we receive, price per unit of goods that we're purchasing, whatever it is. Those are the types of things in which we either intuitively or contextually fall into bargaining dynamics and choose that, well, it's called a dance, and that's because there are moves and counter moves that are quite familiar. So that's where we engage in that dance over. We do not bargain over things that are not quantifiable. We negotiate over things that are not quantifiable, but that's not what we bargain about. When we bargain, well, there are several big questions. How do we set our opening goal, not our opening goal, but our goal? How do we set what we really want to get? And the second is, how do we put that out there? And we have already discussed that. Set those questions aside. Okay, and I want to talk about other, perhaps bargaining pitfalls or commonly encountered errors that people make. And these, we'll see the moves and counter moves for this. So one thing that is very, very common is, picture the following situation. You're applying for a new job, you've accepted, you've been offered the job, and now it really has come down to a discussion of salary. And let's set aside all the other things, because it's easier to say, well, salary, it's not just money, there are benefits, it's employment, the vacation. Yes, I know, I've been employed. But, at some point, even though it's very sometimes convenient to say, well, there's all sorts of other stuff, because then it allows, that we do at some point have to focus on the number. Let's just focus on the number for now. So let's say that up till now in our life we've been paid as high as 80. And I'm not going to say 80 what, because everybody out there has a different set of numbers for what is a lot of money or what is not a lot of money. Let's say we've been paid 80. And we've told ourselves that this time we're really going to aspire high, and we're really going to try to go all the way. We're trying to really satisfy everything we need and get a lot of money and get respect. We really would like to earn 100. Whatever the market price for this kind of thing, that might fall somewhere under objective criteria, or what we think might be on the other party's mind. We don't know exactly what it is, let's say. Maybe 100 would sound high. Maybe it would only sound a little high. Certainly, we assume that they would not want to pay that much. I mean, who would? But we'd really want to earn it. So we walk into the negotiation setting, or the bargaining table with whoever, let's say with the HR representative or the VP who's hiring or whatever it is that we're dealing, and they ask us, so what are your salary expectations? I love that question. What are my salary expectations? I want my salary and yours too, right? Like, this is like the Jerry Maguire kind of approach to things. So here's something that we commonly do at this point. What we say is, well, I would like to see myself earning somewhere about 90 to 100. That's what I'd like to earn. I'd like to earn in the 90 to 100 range. Now, what is the HR rep going to say to us? What might their counteroffer be? Assuming that the HR is a bargainer of any type, we know that the highest number that we'll say is $89,999. What we know is that what they have heard us say is that we are willing to go for 90. So their next offer will be something lower than 90. It might be 85, it might be 89,999, it might be 75 if they open low, etc. But it won't be, or in X% of the time it won't be, okay, that sounds like a pretty fair number, let's go for 95. You're not going to hear that. Again, assuming that they are into bargaining and have done this before and know how to dance the dance, they will not offer that because we have already told them that we will, take 90 as our salary. Now, the question is then, why did we say 90 to 100? What did we gain by that? When we make an offer that's actually an offer in a range, when we offer, we make an offer that's not a single number, but it's in a range, what we're actually doing is we are making a low offer, but we're doing ourselves some psychological service or serving some psychological purpose to let another part of us off the hook. So in this case, what we're doing is since we've said we really aspire to 100, but we're scared of asking for 100. We don't want to sound crazy. We think, what will they think of us? What if they walk? What if they just walk out the door, start screaming? So we can't bring ourselves for some reason to say 100. But on the other hand, we've promised ourselves that we're going to take care of ourselves this time. We are going to ask for the full 100 that we're worth. So the way we balance this psychological conundrum is we say the word 100, but then immediately give it away. Okay? So my suggestion to you, which is not an easy one to pull off, is to stop doing that. Okay? It really isn't easy because it's hard to say that number that we feel and know is high. It's hard to get it out. It's one of the reasons that I advise practicing on this on small things before you reach the big one, and you really do want to say maybe a number that's hard to say. It might be hard to say because it's not in the cents anymore, it's in the dollars, or it's not in the dollars, it's in the thousands of dollars, and it's hard to say that. But lose the range. Similarly, if you're bargaining with someone and someone offers you a range, in other words, their offer is in a range, now you know what you can look at. You can interpret that as they've already told you what they would be willing to settle for. Your answer could be, yeah, right in the middle of that sounds fine, or it could be less than the range. Take the low side of the range and go. Another thing that you might keep in mind is that let's continue on this situation where let's say that indeed they've made me a counteroffer of 75. And I said, well, no, that's really low, and I can't, I really don't want to work for less than 85. Now, picture the HR person saying, well, 85, no, you're going to have to give me a number you can work with. You have to give me some sort of much more reasonable number, something we can really work with, something that shows that you're serious and really in the game and really want to work here. Because 85 is really, really high, and I just can't accept that. I can't take that back to my people. That's really not how we do things around here. And I'm listening to all this and thinking, well, I got to give them something to work with. Got to do something. So I'll say, Okay, but definitely, 83 is as low as it. Now, what has happened now is that I've made a concession, and then instead of waiting for the other party to make a concession of their own, I've made a second concession in a row. Now, without getting too heavily into bargaining theory, I say that this makes sense on a sense level, but often when you do analyses of bargaining, you find that generally speaking, things happen just as you think they do. If one party starts high and the other party starts low, and they make an even number of concessions of around the same rate, the outcome will be somewhere around the middle. Okay? Could be 2% to this side, 3% to that side, but generally it will be around that middle. That's where the dance leads. When does this not pan out? This doesn't play out that way if the parties have made unequal numbers of concessions. So, if HR has managed to maneuver me into making a second consecutive concession, I'm going to earn less on the deal than I would have had I not. So as a shield, what this means is that I need, when HR says that, I need my answer to be, well, I just offered 85, and I thought actually that was a very generous move on my part to show a lot of commitment. I wasn't expecting to work for as little as that, so I'm still waiting to hear back from you what you have to offer. And then they'll probably say, yeah, but you got to give us something to work with. Right? This isn't helping us. Like 85 is still completely out of the park. And the pressure will build on you to throw out another concession. And the challenge here is just not to do that. Even though this dance is starting to look ridiculous. No, you speak first. No, you speak first. No, you speak first. It's starting to look ridiculous, but still. Again, depending on your motivations for being there, but if focusing on assuming that your goal is to get the highest number possible, if you give in on the process challenge that you're faced with of making who will make the next concession, then you're going to earn less. And the more you can stay the course, the more likely it is that they'll say, okay, let's talk about 78 then. Okay, assuming they were at 75. And on the contrary, it can be used as a sword. If they would offer me 78 now, I'd say, look, 78, I've already been offered more. Is there some way you could just up that a little so we could even start to talk about it? And maybe you could maneuver them into making, again, a second consecutive concession, because that would skew the outcome in your favor. Now, a further item to consider is when you're bargaining, how do you make concessions, or how do you make offers? Is there any science behind the offer you should be making? So we started off from 90 and we went down to 85. And then the other party, let's say, moved up from 75 to 80. And we tried to maneuver them into making another consecutive concession. It didn't work, okay? So we're about to make a concession. What should our next concession be? One thing to keep in mind is that when you are making concessions, you're sending messages. And you're sending an information message about how much I'm willing to go, how much I'm willing to give you, what is my move right now. And you're also sending messages underneath the primary message. And here, the notion of making your concession smaller than whatever your previous concession was. In other words, if your previous concession was a $5,000 concession, as it was in this example, and then making your next concession a $2,500 concession, and then perhaps next time it comes around to be your turn to make a concession, you make a $1,000 concession. So your concessions are in decreasing increments. They're getting smaller all the time. And that is signaling to the other party, listen up, pay attention, we're getting close. This is about as far as I can go. And no matter whether the other party is really watching and counting, and even if he or she has seen it a dozen times before and kind of knows the game, it still has its effect. I mean, we're getting close to the limit, because it would be crazy to expect after you made a $1,000 concession to expect that your next concession would be a $10,000 concession, which is what I'd really like you to make, but we're not going to get there. It's obviously not going to happen. So you're sending a message that we're getting close, which, by the way, might not be true at all. You might have extra surplus in your pocket that you're hoping to keep.